Hi, and welcome to the Future of Smart Cities by SEAO Industrial. During this week-long webinar series, we plan to find out how smart cities will impact the future of the industries that we serve as a talent solutions provider. I'm today's host, Alex Corkwell, and this webinar is all about what's next for smart factories. And to discuss this, I'm joined by an expert panel of well-established automation leaders. Before we get better introduced, just a quick reminder that we'll be running a live Q&A later on. So if you have any questions for our panel, please pop them in the chat and we'll try our best to address them. Anyway, let's get started. Paolo, would you like to introduce yourself and tell me a bit more about what you do at Gefran?
Thank you, Alex. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Paolo Butti. I'm the Chief Sales Officer and the General Manager of the Sensor Division at Gefran, which is a family company focused on sensor, components, actuators, and solution for the industrial automation market.
Hartmut?
My name is Hartmut Puetz. I'm the President for Factory Automation, Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Mitsubishi Electric. For us, the factory automation space is divided into separate divisions, like the traditional industrial automation division, but includes as well CNC controls and some machinery business. And I'm very happy actually to be part of the panel today.
Great. And James?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thanks for having me, Alex. I'm James McKew. I'm the Regional President for Asia Pacific for Universal Robots, which is part of the industrial automation group of Teradyne, one of the world's largest semiconductor test organizations. Our organization, I guess, is focused solely on selling collaborative robot arms across the Asia Pacific region, and very interesting time to be in collaborative robotics. So I'm looking forward to this conversation very much. So thanks again.
No problem. No, thanks again, guys, for joining. I'm really excited by this conversation. Obviously, given each individual background here, I think it'll provide a different insight from different parts of the market as well. So really covering the full kind of industrial automation space. So to kind of, before we get into details, Hartmut, could you explain why we need smart factories in your opinion?
Well, yeah, thanks a lot for having me kicking off, Alex. I think I could probably spend about an hour actually in discussing that topic, but let me just sort of like give you our view as Mitsubishi Electric. If you look at the disruptions we were seeing actually over the last 2 years, mainly based on the COVID-19 pandemic environment, but as well in some supply shortages and some trends in certain industries, we see actually, I would say, 2 mega trends. One is the move to a much smaller lot size in manufacturing, which will require actually some smarter ways of managing and controlling the manufacturing processes. We see this actually already in certain industries, like if you look at Coca-Cola, where you can buy actually personalized bottles of Coca-Cola, which is actually, even in a fast-moving consumer goods industry, a trend towards lot size one. The second mega trend is caused by COVID, is sort of like the trend to get manufacturing back into Europe and to not rely 100% anymore on the Asia Pacific stronghold in manufacturing. And if the manufacturing is coming back to Europe, this will require a much smarter way and a much higher degree of automation to be able to compete from an OpEx perspective with the factories in Asia Pacific. So those are, in my opinion, 2 of the key mega trends.
Definitely. I know, Paolo, something that we've discussed before and kind of a reason why we might need a smart factories is from a kind of sustainability standpoint. So what do you think from that kind of direction?
Thanks, Alex. Touching to what Hartmut was saying, the sustainability topic is a big topic, and sustainability really is a multifolded. It's like a multiverse of topic that you can include. For sure, there is the social impact. So for sure, smart factories needs today to be from an energy perspective, also considering the increase of the cost of energy, it's a main topic. For sure, it's also many countries has adopted CO2 emission or carbon neutrality targets, either, let's say, from 2050, but some countries wants to be there in 2030 or even in 2025. And on the other side, there is the sustainability in terms of the people, the knowledge, and the product life cycle that you need to have. So for sure, the new concept of smart factories, they want to have a product already designed to be produced with a shorter time to market, but also with the extended life cycle, because today also products get designed to be upgradable and to have an impact also in terms of the entire chain, you know, between the supplier and the customer. So those smart factories, somehow they even reach a concept of proximity, which today is more digital and remote. But as Hartmut said, when we start moving from one region into the other, those concept of sustainability, it's really 360. So it's, as I said, it's the social impact, is the people, the localization, the type of product development, and then is the intimacy with the customer. So that is, let's say, the three at least of the major aspect that I see on sustainability.
No, definitely. I feel with the sustainability standpoint, it's a case of, it's what we're getting from a smart factory is obviously higher output in terms of efficiency, but also kind of lower output in terms of energy spent as well, which we're obviously seeing from, I think I read something regarding Schneider Electric's recent smart factory and kind of the wonders it's doing for them on that standpoint. And obviously, like you said, every business right now is probably focusing on emissions and how they can bring that down. And I feel like a smart factory is a good way to kind of look at that and combat it. James, what do you, in your opinion, kind of, why do you think we need to shift towards the smart factory way of working?
Great question, and I'm picking up on some of the points from Hartmut and Paolo. You know, what we're seeing is at every level, whether it's cars, phones, any electronic peripheral, drugs, production runs are shorter. That product improvements happen far more quickly, and that the ability to be flexible, you know, has historically driven cobot automation. Is that, you know, you don't have to do this incredibly complex, very you know, mechanically and electrically intensive and inflexible production lines. Yes, they're incredibly fast and designed well for high volume runs for long periods. Increasingly, that's not happening. You know, and we see that, you know, in terms of how long car models go. I remember being in Turin, in Italy, and seeing, you know, Fiat Chrysler's approach to that. So the same with an iPhone. A new one comes out every 6-7 months, and in order to respond to that, they need flexibility. You know, the fact that we see cobots also from they're electric. You know, historically, manufacturing plants have relied very heavily on compressed air.
Yeah.
And increasingly, compressed air is seen as, you know, whilst cheap, so to speak, as power prices go up, it's not efficient and it's not sustainable. And from a CO2 footprint, I think you're seeing people not completely moving away from compressed air driven products, but certainly trying to optimize their use. And where you can use electronics and be flexible, I see from a sustainability, that's a very smart thing to do.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you for that.
Let me add one more comment actually to what James just explained. I think what we see with the cobot space as well is the need actually for social distancing is driving actually some of the increased usage of cobots in a smart manufacturing environment, and of course mainly driven by the pandemic environment for the last 2 years. So I think it's the sustainability aspect, of course, the cost aspect, but to me we need to include as well the social distancing aspect in that topic.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Hartmut, because it's, you know, they offer the ability to automate without floor space expansion. So you can go into a brownfield location and get a level of automation possible quickly without actually having to build a new factory, which I think Paolo pointed out that, you know, you're talking years, not weeks. to get automated. So there's no doubt that's given cobot automation another lift over the past 2 years.
Yeah, if I may add further, the shorter time is also related to the learning process. I mean, Gefran is at the bottom of the data generation, because when you send something, and today we measure any physical variable, but customers are requiring those data to be already ready to use. So really the model that, for example, we are adopting in our sensor business is really to move into sensor as a service, but more important, sensor as a data point. And so the IoT piece is getting that, and you can do that remotely. And you have today a technology that where basically even the sensor can learn and can build a data model. Just an example, I think we are a company that probably similar to what James and Hartmut are experiencing. We have been recruiting only engineers. Today, we have an innovation department who is driven by mathematical doctors, PhD. This was never, and Alex, you know that. I mean, you see also this type of trend. So even from a competency perspective, we are broadening the horizon. And even when we reach university, we now reach, okay, some traditional, more in the mechanics, electrical, electronics, and mechatronics. But now we are really broadening to business school for new business model, or to mathematical people, and not only the traditional data scientists, but really people who can connect, not only being good in mathematics, but while they understand the process and the technology, they also operate with customers. So this is not only an R&D topic, it's really a new model of interacting and dealing with customers, because they expect consultancy. They don't expect only that we drive and deliver a good data sheet or good application case. We need to be hands in hand with them and put really our feet into their shoes.
No, completely agree. That's really well put. Thank you for that, and thank you guys for the insight on that. I'm sure that might have raised a few questions or anything that our kind of audience might have. So just to remind everybody listening and involved, please put them through the chat, and we'll happily answer them at the end. I'm sure James, Hartmut, and Paolo will be happy to look at those questions. So going on to kind of the next topic, really, we've had an idea of why we might need a smart factory, but I think what I've seen and what the conversation I've had is how do we go about implementing that? Is that something where do we need to shut a factory down and kind of implement a smart factory from fresh, or what does that look like? And what are the timescales? Hartmut, sorry, going to go to you again first. We'll keep with this theme. Do you want to kick us off with that one?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much, Alex. Yeah, I think this is again one of those big topics, and I think there's no, at least to me, there's no right or wrong answer actually to that question. I think it depends a lot on the customer environment and sort of like the structure of manufacturing. And the key challenge, I think, if you're starting a greenfield operation, I think it's easy. You design the factory from ground up, actually, to become a smart factory. That's the easy one. The brownfield side, in my opinion, it is important that the customer identifies the critical process steps in his manufacturing environment first. What I mean by that is there are certain steps in the manufacturing process which are critical to the entire sort of like efficiency question or the output of a factory. And then you can actually decide actually how much actually you want to make that process step becoming smart. And one of the keys, I believe, is to try actually to use local, at even the equipment level, local, even artificial intelligence kind of approaches to optimize that process step. I believe actually the holistic approach, which is sometimes suggested to look at the entire factory, would actually probably a little bit difficult to support from just a cost budget perspective. And you always need to put this into the balance of what you're going to achieve as a result and what is the cost actually linked and associated with this. So we believe actually, again, looking at the critical pieces of equipment, start to make them becoming smarter, implementing, and I'm now leading over to probably to Paolo, because I think that's one of the keys as well, using the right sensor technology to collect the necessary data in order to make educated decisions later on about a particular step.
Indeed, thank you, Hartmut. You are right, and you touch for me on the at least for especially for the Western Hemisphere, where we have already a lot of production capacity, which even is not completely utilized, but also related to what James was saying, which is more product launch in a shorter time with bigger refresh. So having the documentation, being able to capture all the improvement in a data fashion. And on one side, looking back and having retrofit and retro compatibility that you can keep up the production, because Alex, to your question, no, nobody wants or can stop production. So it's on a living body, but also planning for the future. And probably in the past, we were all tied to a return on investment and a return on asset utilization is not enough, because the assumption was a certain portfolio of products with certain volumes and quantities. But if you plan for the future, when you're simply going to need to adapt and reply quickly to new product introduction, so you don't really know how, based on what you're going to calculate that. For sure, the sensor market and also the automation market is going up and is continuously increasing. So everyone is sensorizing a lot, including a human body, because then I can pass over to James. But clearly today, like machine and humans are one thing. Also because today there are even possibility to put, let's say, wearable robots with people, and so really what cobots are doing is making this interaction safe on one side and highly productive on the other side. So when you have the data and when you have your assets, then really the challenge is, okay, what do I do with that? And how can I quickly migrate from an old concept of production? You still keep those lean manufacturing principle, but you start thinking, also the interaction between people and machines. And that's something where I think James has something to say.
Thanks, Paolo. Yeah, I think that's a really, a really good point in terms of people and machines. And the number of times I'm asked, how do you explain robots taking people's jobs away? And honestly, in the last 2 or 3 years, I think we've seen UR shift from empowering people to really a concept of people working with robots, not like robots. And as that's evolved, when we started, it was about getting the robots to do the dull, the dirty, the dangerous, the mundane, and really the jobs that people don't want to do anymore. And actually, even in India now, you're seeing large companies automating because the people who own those factories don't want their children growing up to work in them. So people like welders or polishers or surface finishers, you can't attract them. And that's even in the developing world. So the ability for somebody who's a skilled craftsman to show a robot how to do a simple weld or a standardized piece of polishing or sanding, and then go on and do other things, allows production to stay at a certain level, and that person be able to free it up to do more creative things. Now, as that has iterated, one of the first things we did with our incubator was this concept of connected cobots, because increasingly with labor shortages, retirement of older generations, the job of recruiting people to work in factories is just to replace retirees is enormous. So in many cases where our robots are running, they're now running without supervision, and that drove us probably more heavily to developing connected cobots. And the cobots are connected on 2 levels, right? One is, are they operating? and how efficiently are they producing. And then also the other side is our service or our customer success portfolio, who's analysing on behalf of customers, because small customers, brownfield sites, probably don't have people to analyse robot performance and be able to predict when the robots require service. So I think it's interesting that even in a small machine shop or a welding shop, you can have a degree of connectivity that probably wasn't considered, possible, 5-6 years ago. And the second point is, as I think Paolo pointed out, is there is this labour shortage. People are retiring faster than we can hire them and train them. And that's really starting to drive, factory, small to medium enterprise factory automation at an astonishingly fast rate, on top of whatever the lift COVID and other factors provide.
No, thank you for that, James. Definitely agree. I can probably chip in a little bit there from the recruitment standpoint. From what I'm definitely seeing it from my side, from obviously the roles that I'm working on and the conversations that I'm having, there is definitely a skills gap right now for the technical people in this position to come in and maybe operate and work on these machines and have that understanding. I feel like it's something that maybe needs to be introduced early on. I've seen it in the States where they're bringing in kind of cobots and kind of introducing automation at an early stage, maybe in kind of colleges and schools, to kind of assist with that. But is that something that you guys potentially see as a problem moving forward? The technology is there, but maybe the people to operate it and utilize it, is that potentially could be a problem in the future?
Well, personally, I think, of course, you always need to have skilled people to operate equipment. But the nature of automation is that some of the steps are actually going to become automated. And using actually new technologies, particular deep learning, artificial intelligence kind of concept, there's less and less of a need of human intervention. And you can even actually those days already implement closed loop type of manufacturing concepts by using artificial intelligence and deep learning algorithms. It, of course, it doesn't replace actually the humans from actually the working environment. It's probably shifting the skills actually necessary, even at the manufacturing, is shifting, and that, of course, is putting a much more challenging demand on the school systems and the university systems, where we all actually need to find ways to cooperate with the schools and the universities to get actually the students the right access to state-of-the-art technology. So this is a big challenge, and I think we do have the obligation as an automation supplier, making sure actually that this sort of like knowledge transfer is going to be supported by us.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and something you'll know yourself, Paolo. I know when we worked together on a role in the US, you said it's important to have a good relationship with the local colleges as well. And yeah, it's good to see that you're both agreeing with that, because I think it is important for the future for everyone. For me, finding the right people to make sure they have that skill set and understanding, and for you guys to have those people readily available.
I think first of all, I think James touched on a great point. I mean, smart factory needs to be cool so that they can be attractive and not recognized as, probably for many decades, as a dirty, dark, and really bad place to be. Because we need to bring back, like we have been bringing back people into an R&D department, to put ideas into creation and being realized. If we want to attract talents in the manufacturing space, I mean, that place needs to be cool. The second paradigm, which I think we are all shifting, is the fact that robots, cobots, but also automation, it was sold at the beginning of the Industry 4.0 as something that would create less jobs. Well, I'm glad to say to everyone that that's the opposite. So the shortage is there. We don't only have shortage of raw material or electronics components, we have shortage of people. So Hartmut was totally right. I mean, we need to go back into high school, probably even into secondary school. I have 3 kids. And I remember my son when he finished the secondary school, he was implementing a pneumatic robot. And the dream was to start having them playing with technology as early as possible, similar to what has been happening with laptop and software programming. So I think that cobots needs to be available sooner, especially now that they are fully safe. So for me, really, the one of the big advantages of cobots that, again, you will not run any risk. While on a normal robot, when they go at a certain speed, they can really be dangerous. With cobots, we have been removing all of that. And so some of the application, including the fact that the costs are going down. So even the investment, and that's something that also where we need probably some of the governmental help in terms of creating programs and funding opportunities to make sure that we can really start building laboratories and making this technology available and training to the people. So probably if I would have a curiosity also for James is how also is changing the learning and the training path with the adoption. I mean, what's the new trend in smart factory for that, if I may ask?
Look, I think the approach to training is twofold, right? We have an obligation from an I think you'll find our flavor of cobot as well as others in any academic institution. And you know, the platform in our case at least is it can be, you know, those who program in Python or script or whatever, we can satisfy that demand for incredibly advanced automation. But we also have to continue, you know, and I think this is what, you know, certainly I'm excited about, is how cobot automation has completely broadened the scope of automation, the tasks that can be automated, but that may not have historically been considered automation. You know, I was talking in the National University of Singapore, and they developed in conjunction with a vision company the ability to scan aircraft components. And then, you know, when you hear the end user saying, well, we don't want our talented engineers, you know, these are data scientists, analysts, that what the robot's doing in terms of scanning, which is monotonous but important, but it's physically challenging. But they want their talented engineers analyzing what's coming out of the scanner into the PC and drawing the insights and allowing them to move faster. So I really do see that by the ability of them being easy to use for an operator and trainable to highly flexible when programmed, provides a unique automation opportunity for people when they're exposed to them at the university level. So, you know, we've got very, very deep training programs that cater to both, right? Mechatronic, electronic engineers through to, you know, one of my favorite quotes is a gentleman running a machine shop in the southern part of Japan said, well, 18 months ago, I was running a curry shop and now I'm running a robot cell, right? And the people who are optimizing that robot cell are CNC operators. So I think the ability to go into that brownfield and keep people interested in manufacturing through appropriate education is really exciting for all of us.
Definitely. No, I think the cobot especially makes that more interesting, and it's a different way of collaborating. Obviously, the key's in the name, but it's an exciting kind of piece of technology anyway that I'm seeing from my perspective anyway in the market is experiencing a huge amount of growth, and I expect that to continue. So yeah, moving on, I would say we've kind of talked about how we'd implement that and what would that look like, and from a kind of recruitment standpoint as well. What would you probably say are the key challenges of implementing a smart factory? We'll go with Hartmut to kick us off again.
Well, again, Alex, I think this is another one of those questions actually where there's no clear answer to it, because it depends a lot, again, on the manufacturing environment, on the customer, and the customer's priorities. I think implementing such a concept, I think requires, in my opinion, as a first step, a very deep and thorough analysis of the entire manufacturing process in a brownfield factory. You should even actually go as far of possibly considering actually to digitalize even the brownfield site. When you have developed actually the digital model of your factory, and you can do this actually with technologies today that you can digitalize even an existing brownfield site, you can actually start actually a simulation process about what effect would actually a certain step in automating a particular piece of equipment, what would that have on the entire throughput. So I think it requires a very thorough approach to think about implementing smart manufacturing concept. And I think the key to me is going back to an earlier comment I made is that you should think about making pieces of equipment becoming more intelligent, rather than trying actually in a holistic approach, making the entire factory becoming intelligent. I think this is probably, if you would try actually to make the entire factory smart, I think you would probably be better off to tear down the factory and build a new one. So I think that's where I believe actually we need to be focused, really going back to the equipment level and see actually what we can do there to help the entire throughput and efficiency and sustainability of the factories.
That's great. So you're kind of saying starting off small and using that technology to understand where best to next improve or where best to next look at efficiencies.
The thing is, Alex, I personally believe that everything needs to be based on an overall plan. Mm-hmm. I think if you just sort of operationally look at a piece of equipment, try to make that more intelligent, it probably doesn't help the entire factory. So I think this sort of like step-by-step, equipment by equipment level kind of approach needs to be embedded in an overall strategic plan for that brownfield site.
I think it's important. This question is really important, as obviously we look at kind of what's next for the space, and appreciate maybe factories being kind of made right now will be at the smart point. It's just those traditional factories that need to implement that. If, let's say, we're looking at a traditional manufacturing plan and they've heard about smart factoring, they can really see the benefits of it. Probably one of the first questions they might ask is around cost. Do you have anything to kind of highlight around that, Paolo, about the cost of it, or what that actually might look like? Is it something that's going to be really expensive, or what would that look like from your point of view?
I mean, clearly the cost is also dependent on the situation you are. I mean, it's like in change management. You change because you have to, not because you want to. If you are in a difficult situation, that's the worst moment for me to even start evaluating. And probably answering your question, the cost is going to be higher. Bad times needs to be prepared in good times. Sometimes you have the vision and you are a forward looker, so you can a little bit predict. Sometimes you find yourself in trouble, like we all are in the pandemic, and you need to react. So it's also dependent on that. A trend that we see in the market is the strong reduction for what once upon a time was called the proof of concept. Is not the time anymore of making attempts. You do it or you don't do it. But you need to be brave on that. You need to target. You need to allow yourself to fail quickly, but also to scale quickly. There are opportunities to have faster and quicker return on investment. If we look at 2021, for example, the market has been recovering faster than any report I had been reading end of 2020. And 2022 is starting fast again. And there's a further acceleration. So the cost is also related to the ambition you have. If that is an incremental change or if it is a drastic change. And on that side, I totally agree with Hartmut. You may be wanted to completely like cancel and start from scratch, because the retrofit, the migration all of those processes, they don't really bring you a big benefit. Probably they are slightly more effective, but they don't allow you to scale up and to perform at a different viewpoint. This is, for example, what we did in North America. When we acquired a local company, we had the option. We have been starting from scratch, buying a complete new building, and having the what we really need. Now it's a topic of accelerating, scaling up, and having enough automation, machine, and people to scale up the volume. So again, Hartmut had a great point.
Great. No, thank you for that. I think one part of the challenges, and James, you might be able to answer this one very well from your experience, is the reluctance to change. Obviously, given Universal Robots product and implementing that, have you had a lot of pushback initially, and what has that pushback been, and how have you kind of combated that?
Yeah, look, I think at the integrator level, I think there's been a reluctance sometimes for people to see what cobots can do. You hear the comments about speed and accuracy and other bits and pieces. So there's been that somewhat reluctance from hard automators. This is what we've always done. It's always worked. It's kind of like no one got fired for buying IBM, right? And I guess what's happened is that you've seen the innovation centers in large organizations go, well, why aren't we using cobots? From a safety perspective, they're identifying, do they really need the line speed and the inflexibility, or will they sacrifice some line speed for great flexibility? So I think some of the adoption has been driven by the bigger end of town around the world. That's made integrators look at how they can use cobot technology in some forms of hard automation. But I think what's driven even more adoption is the fact that you're seeing operators and end users actually, with the support of our ecosystem, deploy applications within their own factories. And this is giving them a degree of smart automation, and as our robots get smarter and are able to be, monitored remotely, diagnosis systems. I saw there's a good question on cybersecurity. That's, these are all things that are rapidly evolving in our space. So I think, things about a smart factory, I fully agree with Paolo and Hartmut. I think to do it in a brownfield may not be the best return on investment. And maybe that's where cobots can do things at a certain level better. But when you're talking about wanting to scale, then there's no doubt you want to do it with a smart factory. But it's going to be exponentially easier to do it greenfield than brownfield.
No, that's good. I think the cybersecurity part's really important. And actually, my colleague Bill Rogerson's will be doing a webinar. We'll be doing a webinar later today all around cybersecurity in the smart city, because that will literally cover everybody and every webinar that we've conducted this week. But from a cybersecurity standpoint, I'll throw it out to kind of all three of you. Where do you see the challenges there? And obviously, with it being the connectivity standpoint, how do you kind of combat that from a cybersecurity perspective?
Well, I think we see actually the effect actually on not having an appropriate cybersecurity system in place. Pretty much, we see that every day. I think there was recently, I think yesterday or the day before, there was on the news actually that sort of like a big organization storing fuels actually in big tanks were actually affected by a cybersecurity attack, which ultimately actually led to operations being completely stopped. And some of the cybersecurity attacks actually are taking the companies as hostages and only releasing actually the block after they've been paid actually a certain amount of money. So I think we have to take cybersecurity very, very serious, as well in the manufacturing environment, even though people may think, okay, well, my factory is not so vulnerable and it's not the effect is not going to be so big. But if you think actually of being taken as hostage by some of those people, I think it may have a serious effect actually on any factory. I think implementing and developing an appropriate cybersecurity concept, considering even all the connectivity from the sensor level to cloud-based systems and multiple access points actually for external attacks, I think this requires a lot of attention.
Definitely. I think it's really important and something that needs to be taken very seriously. That's interesting. I hadn't heard about that with regards to people being held at ransom with that. It's yeah, definitely. It's a wake-up call maybe for some businesses as well, that they need to heavily invest in that side. You can't really be cheap on that side. Obviously, it's really important.
It is, if I may add and build on that, I you know, on one side, many companies, including us, are investing in having a safe portfolio. So the fact of not underestimating it, it really starts from us, with us. Of course, some older technology may sound strange and crazy, but they are more secure from that perspective, or less exposed. The new one, because clearly the level of connectivity and remote services, they are going up. For example, we just recently the possibility through a near field connection to get some of our solid state relays and power controllers to be configured. That was the first question that the customer said, because of course, from an ease of implementation and speed and stuff like that, that has been completely changing the way of commissioning and installing and maintaining all of the system. But if you cannot prove that you are cyber secure, that you get the certification, the validation, first internally, and then making sure that you can even consult your customer and making sure that, okay, a safe product is going to go into a safe environment. That's a big differentiator, and we will need to pay a lot of attention. And clearly, as I said, it starts with internal and components, and then it goes into system, into lines, and then into the entire factory. And even that interconnectivity level, because of course today also, I think smart factories are also more connected to customer. So now they are more connected to supplier and supply chain. In the future, more and more with customers. So the vulnerability will increase. So if you don't have proper mechanism and competencies and structure and people and knowledge, and if you don't drive those activities as part of the commissioning, so having now cyber security test and penetration test before you kick that off, then you really put your investment into the big danger.
Yeah, definitely. No, really interesting. That. Thank you for that, Paolo, and thank you, Hartmut and James. That's definitely a big factor of the smart factories for the future. I mean, we could probably have done a full webinar just discussing that and the importance of that for kind of our industry as well. So Q&A time. I'll throw this out, and whoever feels like they could answer it or jump in with any input, that'd be great. So this one comes from Rolf. Given that process technology and human skills need to be on the same level of evolution, what is your perception of actual change in leadership skills necessary? So a typical example, executives understanding the vulnerability between humans and machines of a smart factory and cybersecurity. So kind of what leadership skills are necessary for us to progress in this evolution towards a smart factory?
I think from a cobot, human robot interaction, I think, change management and transparency is critical. That people working with or around robots need to understand the systems that are built in, the additional redundancy systems that some operators, some factories may also deploy in addition to the inherent robot safety system. So that this fear of robots and being hurt by them is addressed. I mean, I saw in one of the questions around cybersecurity, you've got a safe to work with robot. What would happen if it was hacked potentially? So there's no doubt our robots and any collaborative robots' own security system has to be on a continual evolution so that it can support and not be a weak point in a greenfield smart factory or a brownfield getting smarter factory. So it's key, you know, as a manufacturer that we have to take the responsibility, but it's also training the people around what the robots can do and can't do so that operators aren't fearful.
Definitely. Thank you for that. So this one, I think, Hartmut, you might be able to provide a bit of insight, maybe not the actual perfect stats and statistics, you might not have them to hand, but from the experience from the panel members, how many manufacturers, so maybe a percentage, already have a smart factory kind of running right now, and how many manufacturers, probably in a percentage again, are ready for it, and what will that potentially look like as a percentage maybe in 5-10 years time?
Personally, looking at our experience in the EMEA region, I would actually say that almost all manufacturers do have a strategic plan in place to implement smart concept at the factory level. I think if you look around Europe, the factories here are built as greenfields. I think they are all implementing a very wide range of smart manufacturing concept. I think the brownfield site, again, we discussed the challenges about making a brownfield site smart at some point in time. But most of the manufacturers I know about, they are actually trying to at least partially make those brownfields smart. I think looking a little bit into the glass bowl 10 years from now, I think it will just be expanded. And at some point in time, whether it's going to be in 10 years or in 20 years, I think pretty much all the factories will be smart and will be connected to each other. So I think we are at the starting point of a very exciting time, I would say, where actually things we were discussing and we were learning at the university many years ago, they actually now become reality based on new technologies being available. So getting back to Jan's question, I think the vast majority of the manufacturing companies in Europe do have, in one or the other way, concepts in place to make the factories becoming smarter.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's really interesting, and thanks for your insight on that point. Are you seeing the same, Paolo, from your perspective in the market as well?
Yeah, I would say that really everyone. The probably one area of focus is how many companies stop or have a rethinking or they have delays in the implementation. That's still something that is a challenge. But the challenge is because also let's say the journey is changing. We are moving from a market of supplier selection into a journey of partnership with a I would say a consulting type of approach, which is also driving, for example, some of the new learning that we are making even to our salespeople. Our salespeople traditionally they had an R&D background. They might have been in the customer service, in the tech support, so very technically grounded, and they moved into sales, and their counterpart were little bit of procurement and R&D departments. Today, the engagement with the customer is at multiple levels. You need to be able to sit with the CFO and helping calculating the return on investment. You need to sit with project managers, making sure that you map the stakeholder, you have a plan, you have your cost under control, and you implement it. So it's not only the technological differentiator, it's the way you literally bring hands in hands your customer and you make the transition, because that is also going to create a long-term relationship, and you are not anymore only a commodity, because every technology faster than in the past gets commoditized, and there are of course many options in the market, but the unique point, that's something that you can only do when you can cover more of this topic. So even in the recruitment process, finding still the solid backgrounds with the good learning, but really exploring some of the new skill set, even from a selling perspective or from a leadership perspective, is a new trend that is coming, and that I believe, at least for Gefran, is going to be a big differentiator moving forward.
Great. No, thank you very, very much for that. Probably going around to, I'll probably ask each of you individually now, kind of one main takeaway you'd like our audience to remember for the webinar. I'll probably kick off with something that I've learned myself today is that a smart factory doesn't have to be kind of end to end. Everything has to be connected, and connectivity, it can start from something very small. Something I probably learned from Hartmut today is that it can start very small, and is using that technology to make other things smarter and looking to the future and how you can implement that. But we'll start with Hartmut again. We'll go to Paolo and James with your takeaways you want the audience to come away with.
Yeah, I think to me, one of the most important takeaways from today's webinar is that people shouldn't be afraid of thinking about concepts of making factories becoming smart. I think there is a lot of new technology available to even actually consider a step-by-step approach, making factories smarter. The new evolving technologies like connectivity from the sensor to the boardroom, using communication standards, cloud-based systems to connect different parts of factories or even factories with each other, using artificial intelligence, deep learning algorithms to make actually the critical pieces of equipment actually becoming more intelligent. I think all those are concepts we should not be afraid of actually thinking about. And the only sort of like prohibiting factor, I would say, implementing smart concept is the reluctance of getting into the details.
Thank you for that, Hartmut. Paolo?
For me, my takeaway, and I really want to thanks again Hartmut and James for the great conversation, and you, Alex, for having us here, is smart factory are going to be more and more human-centric factory. So we definitely, technology will be enabling people, and it starts with the vision of the smart factory. That's more probably for executive and managers to really have the vision to understand why, what, when, at which cost. And then for the people that are physically going to implement all of this and are going to be dealing with this new great technology that all of us are making available for our customers, because the success will be really around the capability of these people to transform this technology into more sustainable factories, and having great experience either as a user and also for the final customer for the products that they will be delivering into the market.
No, thank you for that. No, that's really interesting. James?
And yeah, thanks, Hartmut and Paolo and Alex for the invitation. I think that the key takeaway for me is that your journey, starting your journey on automation is what's key, and a somewhat automated factory is moving you closer on the paradigm to a smart factory than not automating. And I think as people and factory owners become more comfortable with automation, the trajectory to a greenfield plant where you can unleash all the benefits of a connected and smart factory become clearer. So I think, echoing Hartmut, start simple, automate your really simple tasks first, and leave the complex ones to the humans. But start the journey.
Yeah, I think that's important. Just to make that step is really important for a lot of people. But no, that seems like a great place to leave it today. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thanks again to the panel. It's been a really good conversation, and I've enjoyed each input we've had, and I've definitely took a lot away from today's conversation, and I hope the audience have too. Apologies if we've not been able to address your question, but I'm sure if you DM myself or any of the panelists, we're happy to respond with an answer for you, and a video recording of this discussion will be released soon, so look out for that in your emails. And we'll also be creating a downloadable PDF featuring today's main takeaways as well as insight from the remaining The Future of Smart Cities webinars. You'll find the link to reserve your copy in the chat right now. And finally, if you have an upcoming hiring project or would like to find out how CM Industrial is striving to change the way the world sees recruitment, then get in touch. You can do so by sending me a DM on LinkedIn or going to searchingindustrial.com. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you again for attending and have a great day.